Hello, I'm Geeta Singh, the Executive Director of DC South Asian Arts Council. On behalf of DC South Asian Arts Council, I welcome you all for tonight's discussion with leading contemporary painter and graphic artist Arpana Kaurji. DC South Asian Arts Council, Inc. is a nonprofit 501c3 organization bringing Asian art and cultural programs year-round. Soon we will be hosting our first literary festival from May 9th to 15th, 2021. So save the date for that. Thank you, Arpana ji, for taking the time to share your work and experience with us. I know it is very early in the morning for you, so we really appreciate it. And it is truly an honor to have you. I would like to thank Tinu Prakash for moderating tonight's event. She is a well-known contemporary artist in Virginia. Welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you, Snigdha Somani, our intern, for managing tonight's Zoom session. Thanks, Snigdha. And thank you, Harpreet Kaur, for hosting tonight's event. Harpreet is an Emmy award-winning producer. Her documentaries Little Revolution and Widow's Colony were screened at the DC South Asian Film Festival and around the world. Thank you for doing that. And Harpreet, over to you.
Thank you, Geeta. I'm really excited to be surrounded by immense talent today. I have the honor of introducing and being in conversation with one of the most respected, celebrated, talented, and prominent artist, Arpana Kaur. She's a self-taught artist whose work depicts images and themes that are layered with her personal experiences, cultural influences, and spiritual inspirations. We'll have the opportunity to hear her talk about how she weaves these stories together and brings them to life on her canvas. Since 1974, her work has been exhibited across the globe. Her solos, apart from Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, Bangalore, and Chennai, have been held at key galleries in London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Singapore, Munich, New York, and the Copenhagen National Museum. Her retrospect of 40 years was held in 2016 at the National Gallery of Modern Art in Bangalore. Her work can be seen in museums of modern art in Delhi, Mumbai, Patna, Chennai, Jaipur, Bhopal, Chandigarh, Singapore, the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, Brooklyn, and at the Victoria and Albert Art Museum in London. She was awarded a gold medal, the 6th International Triennial in New Delhi. She received the All India Fine Arts and Crafts Society Award and has been interviewed by BBC and on many other prestigious networks. In 1995, she was commissioned by the Hiroshima Museum of Modern Art to execute a large work for its prominent collection for the 50th anniversary of the Holocaust. Since 1981, she has created 3 large non-commercial murals in Delhi. She has a concern for the environment, spirituality, women, and the growing violence in the world rooted in the language of ancient Indian sculptures and miniatures. That for you was Arpana ji's short bio. And that is why we admire her and are truly honored to have her here with us today. On behalf of DC South Asian Arts Council, I'd like to welcome Arpana ji, who is joining us from her home in Delhi. Good morning, Sat Sri Akal, and thank you for being here with us. Now, before we dive...
Thank you for having me for crossing.
Our honor to have you here.
It's my zero lack of technology and sending Akshit, who's a young artist, to help me out with this.
Oh, I'm sure it will go very smoothly. But before we actually dive into our discussion, I'd like to also introduce Tinu Prakash, who is a contemporary artist based in Virginia. Her paintings include landscapes, portraits, and abstract work of art in oil and acrylic. She has been passionate about art since childhood, with undergraduate degrees in literature and commercial art. She initially worked as a graphic designer, but began pursuing her passion for painting. Tinu's paintings have been featured in juried exhibitions across Virginia and Maryland, and she also does commissioned work. Her knowledge and experience as a contemporary artist will help shape our conversation today. So thank you, Tinu, for being here, and good evening to you.
Good evening. It's such an honor to connect with you, Arpanaji, and I really look forward to having a conversation with you about your art.
So we are in two different time zones physically, but emotionally and mentally, we are all creatively connected, and that's what brings us together today. Arpanaji, your love, appreciation, and passion for painting started at a very young age. Can you draw a picture for those who are listening of that young girl? What motivated her to pick up the brush? Who influenced you? The environment, the people in your life, and your circumstances. So take us back to your childhood days where your journey first started as an artist.
The one and only person in my life then and now is my mother. My writer mother, who writes Punjabi books, she has 22 of them, and very bold books on social issues, on corruption in our society, on women's issues, because in those days when she began to write, 50, 60, 70 years ago, I would say, 70 years ago, she's 86 now, the position of women was very different. And as a single parent, I saw her struggle, financial. I won't talk much because otherwise I begin to weep very easily. Financial and with society, because as a single mother, bringing up two daughters, it was very difficult. So those days, and now she has built a whole institution where she, from my paintings alone, is running a vocational school for girls from the slums. And this was opened in 1975 in my sister's memory. And we have about 100 girls a day and 5 teachers, and there are free classes. We have never taken grants from the government or any foreign source or any corporate source. It somehow runs, and runs well. So it's vocational training in computers, beauty, stitching, embroidery, and Hindi, English, and it helps them find jobs. It gives her a lot of satisfaction. And she last week had her 58th South Asian Writers Conference, which she's a pioneer of, and she began doing this with Indo-Pak writers way back in 87. So she's highly respected in the SAARC region and called Mother of SAARC. She is a very strong woman, physically very frail now, and she's my whole world. And she encouraged me because it's a very difficult, it's like walking on a sword, choosing to be a painter. And she was there to support me financially and every other way. I would feel extremely guilty because art material was very expensive. And she said, I am there. I took up a teaching job for a year, and she said, I don't need your check. Just focus on this. And wherever I was a very shy child, and wherever I had shows, say in Bombay or London or Calcutta, my mother would travel with me. So, and she always encouraged me to opt for the best of canvas and colors. As a result, even my work of 50 years ago, which we have in our collection, is still fresh. Like the National Gallery works of 1982 are still fresh because she said never compromise on colors, never on material. So she had this strength in her.
So I'd like to say that Arpanaji, your work is so powerful and it's very direct. And as an artist, I respond to it as I feel that there's lyricism in your work and it's sensitive as well. and you paint very large canvases. I think your size is from like, you go from 6 feet to 9 feet and beyond. I mean, they're really huge canvases. I'd like to just ask you about the process of your painting, how you, your journey through a painting, and how you approach these canvases. If you could tell us about.
So my canvases were always oversized, and we lived in a small house, and Akshat was helping me with this in his neighborhood. And 6 foot was, I wanted life-size paintings. It was very difficult in terms of space. So
Right.
I did a tiny studio space in the Lalit Kala studios for 13 years. And then my mother, brick by brick, by selling everything we had, and then my paintings began to sell. She built this Cultural Center, Academy of Fine Arts and Literature, which is a 3-floor big brick building. And now I have a massive studio. She has a little museum for my works, little museum, and she's very possessive about my works. I have to sell them secretly sometimes. She sees every work that sells, she says, this is my favorite, don't let this go. And
Yeah.
I say, Mommy, how many can we keep? So it is a battle even now. I mean, and I tell her, she'll say, make me another one if you're selling this. So now we have 3 free museums, or one of miniatures, one of folk and tribal art, apart from the school I mentioned, and they are ticketless, and one little museum of my own work, and of course the literary gatherings, and it's all built by one single woman. I did not help her because I felt she was taking on too much, and I said, I'm a painter, you're a writer, who's going to run this? So there are difficulties. It's a huge space, but I have enough room for my even 18-foot, or recently I did 26-foot works for the new Supreme Court building. So she has created this space for me now.
Well, that is wonderful.
But in the early days, I had to paint on top of a painting to keep painting because there was no room. So painting was a necessity like breathing. So one was painting on top of a painting or keeping the paintings in a roll, and then they would deteriorate over time. And aunt's ceiling was leaking, so I gave her 4 canvases to cover the ceiling to make room for more paintings.
I'd like to also ask you, Arpanaji, about your color palette. Your colors that you use are really forceful and they're very emotive, but yet they're simple. You tend to use, sometimes you just use primary colors and iridescent colors. They're very simple and yet so strong in their statements. So if you could tell us your thoughts behind these color choices, and at least you could pick some of them and talk to us about the significance behind the color.
I think in color, and if I could, I would eat color. And I do eat color every day actually. I don't know how much color I've swallowed so far. It's supposed to be highly toxic, but I couldn't care less. The miniatures are soaked in color, Indian miniatures. You'll see a lot of primary gem-like colors. So we are a very colorful country. So when I've shown in Germany and say London, I realized that even in our poorest villages in Rajasthan, in Punjab, everywhere, there is a riot of color. And the poverty on one side and the color on another. So we are a country of color. And I think color should surprise you. So I use color with a sense of surprise. Secondly, I use a lot of black because when you light a lamp in the dark, it glows more against the darkness. So when I have to offset my blues and my yellows, I feel that the black background will offset them more. So black is my great passion, I would say.
Yeah. Your paintings have often been described as figurative narration. There's a lot of symbolism in your work, and you cover a lot of themes, right from the abstract concept of time, passage of time, life and death, day and night, love, devotion. but the woman figure is a central theme in a lot of your series. If you could talk to us about the woman figure that you portray, and in the many different ways that you have portrayed the woman in your different series.
Some of my series have the woman as protagonist, but
Mm.
the way woman was, say, painted as a object of luscious beauty, I am the opposite. She is self, she's soul. And although I painted some women subjects, they're always in context of a theme like Prakriti, which is Mother Nature, Prakriti. Or, my other subjects like the 84 massacre, violence and massacres are perpetrated by men. So in that, the male figures are predominant. And the male figures are predominant even in my Buddha and my Nanak and my Kabir series. But yes, where I've taken woman, it's in the context of nature and dharti and nourisher and prakriti.
Yes, and you did the yoginis you've done, and you've done the of course the series of the widows of Vrindavan, which is again very emotive and sensitive. And
That
So,
happened
oh, sorry, go ahead, Arpanaji.
because I went to see Mathura Museum in 1997. Mathura Museum is a huge collection of sculptures from 5th century BC onwards,
Mhm.
all undocumented, of course. And so you have to physically travel to see, because in those days there was no internet. So wherever I needed to see miniatures, like in Udaipur Museum or Alwar Museum, the Banaras Hindu University Museum, all our museum collections are undocumented. Even our Grand National Museum of Delhi, which I love, which has Harappan, Chola, Gupta miniatures in thousands, all those collections are undocumented. So I went to Mathura Museum in 1997, and it was closed for some reason. So I went to Vrindavan instead. I was with a group of artists, and I went to see the romance of the temple architecture, because Vrindavan is associated with gopis and, ras between Krishna and the gopis. What I saw was 10,000 widows, and they were shriveled and they were shaven, and they were living in 4 huge bhajanashrams, and they were chanting for 1 rupee a day. For 8 hours they chanted, they got 1 katori of rice and 1 rupee. So it was such a shock for me that I go to see art and architecture, and I see this gruesome reality. Most of them are from Bengal. They are shaven because hair is attractive. So I made myself, I wept so much. I was physically ill. A friend of mine in the group who's a painter said, "You have to paint this." So I made myself a little emotionally strong, went back next month, spent some time, and ended up doing the series Widows of Vrindavan in 1988. It was a reversal of the myth I'd grown up with. It's the place of the Ras Leela. So sometimes myths can lend them to reversal also in the current circumstances. So the show was in Delhi, Bombay, and it even went to the Festival of India in Moscow, in Tretyakova Gallery, where Mrs. Gorbachev, who inaugurated the show, asked why the women were shaven. So the world knows so little about these things.
That is true. I'd also like to ask you, Arpanaji, about the symbolism and your metaphors that you use. You've used many metaphors in different paintings, but and I, it's impossible to talk about all of them. But if you could tell us about a couple of the metaphors and the motifs that you use, like primarily, the scissors and the metaphor of the thread that runs through a lot of, your series.
About 20 years ago, I felt that day and night, which we take so much for granted, has not been painted. So I said, how should I paint this phenomena of endless cycles of day and night and time? So I thought I'll do a yellow embroidery weaving the thread of life, and simultaneously a black same. If I had made a male figure, it would have been a feminist painting. I didn't want that. I
Mhm.
wanted time. So the
Yeah.
black woman is wielding a scissor, and in the Greeks say, that uh, even in Greek mythology, the scissor cuts the thread of life. And so do we. Yama, the god of death, cuts the thread from your navel when the time is up. So it became a way of depiction. I'm not tired of that series. It's been 20 years. Wherever people see a scissor, they think it's my work. And the late Satish Gujral nicknamed me Scissor. But Sarabhai was interviewing me for some CNN channel, and she said, I prefer the word dhaga, so I'll call you dhaga. I said, I also prefer dhaga because it connects. So this is my favorite series on time and life and death. And I like painting dualities in work anyway. From the very beginning, sometimes I don't like harmony in work, that it should be one thing. I like opposites and dualities, which when we see the images, I'll point out those.
So Arpana ji, I know you had mentioned the spirituality and Guru Nanak Dev Ji. I know it's been a reoccurring theme in your work. You have some fascinating and intriguing pieces of Buddha, Kabir, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Yogi, and then you have the Sufi series. Again, I guess this goes back to your upbringing and the influence that Gurbani, Kirtan, and Sikh history had in your life. For me, while these paintings are about faith and they're spiritual in nature, they're dark, yet they're soothing. I want to understand what brings those images to life for you. Are you listening to Kirtan? Are you thinking of history? How does it all come together so beautifully when you're painting?
In the house I was born, my Nanaji's house, we had a little room for the Guru Granth Sahib. And that Guru Granth Sahib he had brought from Lahore after partition. The family was holidaying, he was a doctor, and my little mother and her little brother, they would come and holiday in Kashmir or Shimla every year because they all loved the mountains. Mommy was 13 when the partition happened, and he had left his in-laws and his parents behind in Lahore when the partition happened. So he said, I have to go and rescue them. Everybody said, are you mad? You're a Sikh. You'll be killed on the spot. He said, I can't leave them to die. So Kushwant Singh uncle's uncle was a very dear friend. He said, if you're going to die, I'll die with you. So the two men took 20 days to cross the border, which now takes 20 minutes to cross the Wagah because they are hiding. And it was a street of doctors where my grandfather had practiced. Somehow, with the help of the army, they made their way to Chamberlain Road and they rescued the four old people. The house was surrounded by mobs. But because his neighbor was a very powerful doctor and well known man with a nephew in the parliament, they were able to get the four old people out. So they said, anything you want to take with you? He said, the Granth Sahib. So that Granth Sahib we read every day, and it's still in the house. And that little room in my grandfather's house was a refuge. Any problem that happened, school exams, illnesses, any pain you wanted to share, you would go into Babaji's room and say, Babaji, you would cry and ask for grace. And even now, my mother kind of talks to that Granth Sahib, which we read every day. But because of my mother and my grandfather, we had a very secular upbringing. We would also go to Nizamuddin all year. I was in a Christian school, so we would go to the church, for the morning hymn every day. And the secularism is part of Guru Nanak's philosophy anyway, because when he came out of the river Bahi in Sultanpur Lodi, where his spiritual enlightenment occurred, and he although he was from childhood, he was that. But the spiritual journey and the physical journey started in Sultanpur Lodi with Mardana. And the first words he said when he came out of the river Bain, I've been there 20 times, it's magic. He said, Na ko Hindu, na Musalman. Although in those days, Babur was killing people, they were raping women, they were looting, plundering. To say in those days, na ko Hindu, na Musalman. So he was disliked by both in a way.
Mhm.
And he says, koi kahe bhutna, koi betala, koi kahe aadmi nanak bichara. Some say I'm a bhoot, some say I've lost my mind. Koi kahe, but some say he's a man at least. Nanak bichara. He was much misunderstood in his times. And after that, of course, he started his journeys right from, Afghanistan and down to Sri Lanka and Dhaka. So I have been to a lot of those places, Sri Lanka, Dhaka. Then he goes up to Sikkim and Leh, where there's not a blade of grass, and he crosses into China and Tibet. So I went with a doctor in oxygen cylinder, but he went on foot with Bala and Mardana, and he went up these rough terrains. He traveled everywhere, and with his message of, compassion and love and equality of all faiths. And wherever he'd hear of an enlightened being, like Baghdad, there was a Pir Balol. He went specially to meet him. And then the Pir said, "What will I do without you? Please don't go." So he stayed on a few days. And then after that, from that spot, the Pir did not move for 60 years till his death. And we have to remember Madana was a Muslim, Bala was a Hindu. So there was no
Mhm.
division in his mind. He would say, Mardania, Rabab utha bani aayi hai. Please pick up the Rabab. The holy poetry is descending, and Mardana would pick up his Rabab. In fact, Kamla Kapoor has written a very beautiful, humane book from Mardana's viewpoint called The Singing Guru, which I've read many times.
Okay. So, Tinu, did you have a few more questions, or should we let Arpana ji share some of her paintings with us?
I think it'd be lovely to see the paintings.
Mhm. I think people are waiting for that.
Yes, yes.
I'll start with my influences. This is a very old sculpture in the National Museum. And, the speciality of Tino had asked me about my figuration. Uh, we can move on to the next, please. The figuration in our sculpture and our miniature painting, this is one of our museum paintings of the Sikh miniatures. You'll see the simplification of the figure and the kind of purity, the color, always. The simplicity of the figure gives it a certain abstraction. So this led me to believe that unlike Western realism, there's a beauty in abstraction within the figurative. And we have huge amount of examples of that in our, take the figure of Ganesh, for instance, almost surrealistic. A human body with an elephant head or the multi-armed. There's an abstraction always in because we never believed in Western camera perspective. Next, please. This is a living tradition of folk art, where I've used elements in my own work. Because by accident of birth, our village artists are born in a little village which has no electricity. By accident of birth, I'm born in the capital of India, which has all the privileges. So my way of paying homage to this living tradition, which has been ignored for so many years. It's coming into its own since last 10 years. So I have a collection of, my mother and I began collecting this 40 years ago. It was very inexpensive. Now they have come into their own and recognized, not only in India but internationally also. So I'll show you later in my work how I've incorporated these elements. This is Varli painting from Maharashtra. Next, please. My first painting done at the age of 9 from Amrita Shergill's Hill Women. I took out these two figures of mother and daughter and I explained why. My mother has still kept it, although it's in a very bad shape. So this was done, I would say, in early 60s, at the age of 9. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So there's huge disparity in Indian society socio-economically. So I thought Tinu was asking me about symbolism.
Yes.
One sheltered, one having everything, fat and fair, and the umbrella is a symbol of worldly possession, and the others, it's like a maid servant series also I did in the 70s, which Faiz Ahmed Faiz carried 8 paintings in his magazine Lotus. He was publishing from Beirut, where he was in exile. So that he published in 79, the maid servant series. So these social disparities have always bothered me, made me cry. The current migrant crisis that we went through was horrible. And this was acquired by Dr. M.S. Randhawa for Chandigarh Museum. I did 2 or 3 of the series in 1980, so it goes back 40 years. Next, please. There was no audience for art. In Delhi, we had only 2 galleries. If you were sitting in a gallery, you had a solo, you would have one visitor a day. So the poor man is listening to himself because often you're the only audience who was looking at your own painting. This was a series of about 20 works. So from each series, I've chosen about 1 or 2 works to share with you due to paucity of time. Next, please. Then came the 84 massacre. I've never seen anything like that. My family had been through partition, and my childhood dreams had the blood soaked train to Pakistan, Pushwan Singh Uncle's book. But I'd never seen 3,500 dead in Delhi, capital of India. And the wisps of smoke started going up around our house, and the taxi stands were burned, the shops were burned, looted and burned. We didn't know what was happening. And our neighbors had put a ladder for us, and friends were saying, get your passports ready. My mother and I said, no, we'd rather live and die in this country. And we were 2 alone women. My Nanaji, who lived with us, had passed away, thank God, 2 years before. He wouldn't have been able to take the shock of it. It was a huge shock. And my mother and I started moving out on the second or third day. One of our non-Sikh neighbors and my mother's non-Sikh childhood friend, 4 of us drove through riotous mobs of 400, 500 people. We were near the medical institute where it all started, where Mrs. Gandhi's body had been kept, and where the mob started, bloody mob started gathering. They pelted the president's car. They started dragging out people from buses and trains, but we drove through those mobs to the relief camps. And there were thousands of people crammed up in the relief camps. Um, my mother had written pools of blood after Blue Star, Laude to Bache, and there people recognized her and they said, you had written pools of blood, but see, this is a sea of blood. And the camp we went to, Trans Yamuna Farish Bazaar camp, 10,000 people, no toilet facilities. There was a school next door and there was a common wall. So my mother went to a very cultured and decent minister, Jagmohan, and she said, please break that wall so that the school toilets can be available for these people. He had the wall broken within few hours. So for few months, we were going there with supplies. We emptied whatever we had in our bank. We were taking everything, and there were groups of people doing that all the time. People like Jaya Jetli, who built Delhi Heart, Nagrik Ekta Manch, a lot of people who were working on those relief camps. But we were taking as many supplies as we could. And it was a horrible time. I stopped painting, and then I thought to myself how to get the pain out of my system. So I did a series of about 20 paintings and some drawings called World Goes On. This is one of them. They were all 6-foot works, like my usual size, and Mr. Al-Qazi of Art Heritage Gallery had the courage to show them. So they were in a solo show, World Goes On, in 1985 in Delhi. Then we tied up with Simrosa Gallery in Bombay. then it went to Calcutta in 1986, and it also went to London, this show, in October Gallery. So it did travel to 4 places. There were hardly any takers for such tragic work. We'll move on to the next, please. I didn't know how to paint death. I've never painted death. So I thought it was getting too much for me. So I thought if I do a drowning figure and I use water and the others are just not concerned, you know. But I took a lot of elements even for this from the Indian miniatures, where the curved horizon line is from Basoli miniatures. And it's a 7 by 5 foot painting in my collection. I had a series of 20 I kept, 5 for myself, and the rest are scattered with a few other people, like especially Sikh Foundation, Dr. Kapani, wanted work of this series, and Dr. Kanuja, because they travel their collections to museums. Dr. Kapani, of course, traveled to his collection to many museums in America. Dr. Kanuja, who lives in Phoenix, has traveled his collection to Phoenix Museum, with which he has links. But I have kept 4 or 5, including this one. So water entered my work then for the first time, and it's again a reversal of the traditional meaning of water, because here water is death. How to paint death? A drowning figure. Next, please. This links with that, although this is taken from a book. I didn't have the presence of mind to shoot the real painting before it went to Hiroshima. I got a letter in the name of Mr. Arpana Kaur in 94 from Hiroshima Museum mayor, the mayor of Hiroshima and the Hiroshima Museum curators, saying that they were commissioning 10 artists, and they offered a huge sum of money. They were very apologetic, they were offering very little, but it was a lot for those days. So I did this big triptych, 12 by 6 feet, Where Are All the Flowers Gone, which was a anti-Vietnam War song. And I very much wanted lotuses because it's the symbol of India, and then soldiers being sent to the death, the woman in the black nuclear rain. I did not shoot from the original painting, but from their brochure later, which I regret very much, but the painting is there. So the letter came to Mr. Arpana Kaur because all the other 9 commissioned, like Anthony Green, Nim Jun Paink, Sam Francis, they were all international names, and they were men. And my work had accidentally gone through National Gallery in the 80s to Japan twice and been written about in the newspapers, and they didn't know whether it's a man or woman, but I didn't correct them. I was so afraid of losing this commission, because for me, Hiroshima meant a lot. When I was a child, my mother would close her eyes, make me close mine, and pray for 2 minutes uh, for like we do on Bhagat Singh's Martyrdom Day, which was March 23, just few days ago. Or we do for Udham Singh's Martyrdom Day, or we do for October 2, Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. So similarly on Hiroshima Day as a child, even now, at 66, I close my eyes on Hiroshima Day. I never forget Hiroshima. So for me, getting that letter was like a huge blessing, and to be the only Indian painter. So when they, of course, called me there, when the painting was installed, they were very nice to me. I was there for 2 days, and I realized why the Hiroshima had been chosen, because it's a little city between 2 low hills. So they felt the impact of the bombing would be maximum. And I also, this was a phase of my work where all the triptychs I've seen painted ever, like Max Beckmann, has a continuity of color and image. I, in this phase of my work, felt if I suppose I divide the color and the image into 3, and I did diptychs also, and still it has a thematic unity. So it somehow worked, and I did many in this series where I was breaking up into primary colors, and still it worked as a diptych or a triptych. So I have these phases of my work which I then get tired of and then move on, but some I don't exhaust, like day and night. Next, please. And there's a little link where the stem of the lotus becomes the stem of the gun. I don't know whether you all remember that, Where Are All the Flowers Gone, Where Are All the Soldiers Gone. In my childhood, the American public had revolted against the Vietnam War, and this was a very popular song. Widows of Vrindavan, where the twisted trees that I saw were actually in Radhakund, the place of the Ras. So it was an inversion of the myth because the widows are now, the gopis are now the widows. So this was also a series of about 20 works, and here water is there again because, in this water there remains, after they are gone, their families have discarded them there. But some of them do believe that they'll meet Krishna in that river, the blue Krishna. Next, please. Kabirji is weaving water. I've been to his birthplace in Varanasi. It's very magical. And he weaves water because we are always surrounded with religious disharmony. It was then, in Babar's time, it is now even more. We know about that. So he says, सुन समाज में बुनत हमारी हमरा झगड़ा रहा न को काजी मुल्ला बिसरत दो. I'm weaving in the great eternity. What do I have to do with institutional religion? You know, I have no quarrel with anybody. And that was he, हज हमारा गोमती थी जहाँ बसे पीताम्बर पी. So he is neither Hindu nor Muslim, he is both and he is beyond institutional religion. This was a series of 33 works and 6 huge installations that was shown in 1993 in Delhi. Next, please. This is his birthplace in Varanasi, totally magical, and they have preserved his loom and his prayer beads and his wooden khadamas there. The pond in which Niru and Nima, the weavers, found him, so nobody knows what he was. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, one of my eternal. This is Soni Maiwal, and on the left you have the 18th century Soni painted by Nansuk, Punjab Hill painting. And Nansuk was very famous, and I've chosen the same posture deliberately so that I connect with that tradition because it flows in my blood. And Soni, incidentally, is a real person, not a myth. She was born 500 years ago in Akhnur near Jammu. I've been there. I've stood in that river and wept that I could visit it and actually feel her there. And even Guru Gobind Singh Ji writes about love like he Ranja Soni Maiwal Sase Punno Jin Prem Kiyo Tin Hi Prab Payo. So this is something that's very popular in our folk songs, Romeo and Juliet, and in our films. There have been 2 films on Soni Maiwal. On the upper portion, I have taken from the Udaipur miniature tradition, where the arrow is for killing, the hunting. And this is the love arrow, and on the right corner is our love god, Kama, in a multiple parrot figure, which is a traditional Rajasthani folk art motif. And the swimmer's posture is deliberately connecting with the 200-year-old posture of Soni. I've done a whole number of Soni Maiwals. Bradford Museum has a triptych which they are juxtaposing permanently with the 19th century Romeo and Juliet. So it is an eternal love story. Next, please. There were about 30 paintings in this, and she swims across the Chenab to meet her beloved. It's like a tryst with not only love but with death also. Next, please. Body is just a garment. This was from the Kabir series, where in the Granth Sahib you have many metaphors in all the gurus of the body being like a garment. Even in Gita, Sukh and Dukh, life and death. When Krishnji tells Arjuna in the battlefield, why grieve? The body is just a garment. And the tradition of multiple figures within one, I found in Persian miniatures and in Rajasthan miniatures. I adapted them to the human figure because we don't know how many times we've come and gone. They say 84 lakh Juna, but we don't know how many times. So this is one of the series bodies Instagram. Next, please. My grandfather who brought the Granth Sahib in 1947. At the back, I painted Madhubani lions because he went back and rescued these four old people, and all he brought back was a bundle of memories on his back. So when India turned 50 in 1997, I wanted to paint him, although I painted my Nanaji earlier also, holding me in his lap. Uh, and next, please. Then I also painted Bhagat Singh. Next, please. Yeah, that's Bhagat Singh and the Madhubani artist lions, uh, because they were all lions. Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, Sukhdev, and that's the Basanti Chola, which is very famous song. Mera Rang De Basanti Chola, My Rang De Basanti Chola. So I felt that we contemporary artists had not painted Bhagat Singh, Udham Singh, so I did a few in 1997 when we turned 50. Next, please. Yeah, that's on the partition. It's a terracotta which is in the Partition Museum in Amritsar. Luckily, they have a museum. And it's about a 2 by 2 foot terracotta khadama. And the khadama is a symbol of Gandhi as well because the partition cut across his heart. Next, please. My favorite day and night, the endless repeated cycles of day. And I've, those are the stitches of time, those red stitches, the cut that time makes in us. And it's a 9 foot by 6 foot painting. Next, please. Like the hands of a clock, so this is the movement in this day and night. And we always want time to go slow. Time casts a shadow, that shadow you see on the right. But there's a burst of day on the left also. So the dualities that I love are here. Next, please. It's called Endless Journeys because the little plane is from the father of Gond art in Madhya Pradesh, Jangar Sham, who went to Japan on a scholarship. He was exploited by the people who took him there. He hung himself because they took his passport. His paintings were selling a lot. And I knew him well. So it's called Endless Journeys. It's day and night on the left, life and death. And the shocked face that you see in the middle is from Madhubani folk art. So I combined many traditions. And Jangar Singh Sham started this school. I mean, he was a farmer and he used to sing for a living, farm for a living, and they were traveling singers. So he started this school and he painted this little plane because he was invited to Japan and then exploited and then committed suicide there. We had a big protest in Delhi outside the Craft Museum after his death. 9 by 6 foot work. Next, please. The harvest motifs, the third slide I'd shown you initially is from Wali art. It's nature who's making us the creation, and she's simultaneously cutting us also. So within nature are the destructive forces also, but it's a cycle that goes on and on. Next, please. This is in the National Gallery in Delhi. This is the Warli art. And, I incorporate these because I respect these artists so much. They have so little and yet they sing and dance and create these beautiful pieces. We have a little museum of 800 pieces of all the tribal arts from all over India. They are different in every region. Next, please. Next, please. This is from the Sita myth, where Lakshman, I've done a series of these called Green Circles. Sita was a daughter of the earth. So part of her is green, part brown. And of course, she had to go through this test of fire, which is that you see on the left. she has to draw her own green circle around her to protect her because we are devastating the earth. And COVID is a result of that, as we know. Next, please. Uh, this Kalpavriksha inverted tree I'd read about in Kathopanishad and in Gita, and I always wanted to paint it. So I could never find a visual reference, and I have a huge amount of books on Indian art. And I started buying them when my paintings began to sell. They are very expensive, so I would I even exchanged my smaller canvases with books that a gallery had published on miniature art, Kumar Gallery. So in 1980, they'd done a big book on miniature painting. It was 2,000 rupees. So I said, I had too many paintings. So I said, how much concession? They said, will you give us a small painting? I said, thank God I'm rid of a painting. So like that, I exchanged two books for two paintings, that Kumar Gallery had published. And Pratapaditya Pal, who was then LA Museum's chief for the Indian section, had written that book. So the Kalpavriksha, this is a 10-foot diptych, is the tree of desire. It's one of the gems that came out of the ocean, like Amrit, when the ocean was churned. 14 gems, Kamdenu, Kalpavriksha. And it's the tree of desire that fulfills all your wishes. So we were living in these DTA flats, and there was no green, no tree near us. So I always longed for this green. And that's how this painting happened. I went to the biggest scholar, Kapila Vatsyan, who's written many, many books. I said, Kapila auntie, have you ever seen a Kalpvriksh painting? She said, never. So I said, it's there in the Gita, it's there in the Upanishads. And she said, I recall a sculpture somewhere in Calcutta Museum. Indeed, it's there. And I did a series of two, three, one Singapore Museum acquired of this size only. So I did about two or three. It's a fascinating image. And then I was traveling in Rajasthan in Jaisalmer. 40 kilometers from Jaisalmer is the old capital, which is now buried in sand. Uh, it's called Ludarwa, 40 kilometers from Jaisalmer. And only one little Jain temple survives and a huge Kalpa Vriksha. The Jains call it Kalpataru. It's in metal. And I said, oh God, I have to come here to find you. This was maybe 25 years ago. There is one Kalpa Vriksha standing in the desert in metal. It must be about 15 foot high, and all the foliage is on the ground. So this is the richness of a tradition that one really does so little, one knows so little. It's it's all been there, done before. Next, please. It's one of the few murals I've done. I've done about 7, 8 non-commercial murals. So this was outside a building, which is a very busy area. So they always say we have no money, but we'll give you the best wall. So then I go and check out the wall. Is it a place where thousands of people will pass? Yes, it is. So this is a very popular tourist area called Thammal in Kathmandu. And it's a Buddha who's trying to preserve all the elements of nature within him in the middle of this crazy traffic. And a lot of that traffic is actually local Nepalese traffic. It was done on tiles in my studio. I first went and saw the wall, and it's outside the SARC Secretariat, a very busy area. So I said, okay, I'll do it for nothing. So this is how this came about. And it's there. I mean, it was done 10 years ago, I think. Next, please. Similarly, Bangalore city offered me 5 walls in very, very, very popular areas. And this wall is outside the Heber Rorik Museum. It has a little lotus pond. So again, I've done this. It's a very busy road, so I've done these circles of traffic around the Buddha. It was done in 2005 during Rorik's centenary. That's the first mural I did. It was the first piece of public art in Delhi. And there's a German artist who wanted to collaborate with me, is Winke Nissen. He had a grant from Germany, of course, to live here for 2 months and do the mural. I had nothing from anybody. But I said yes, I'll do it for free. So between India Gate and Connaught Place, on the wall of my old school, which was a fees was 15 rupees a month, Lady Owen School. The standard was very high. That's all my mother could afford, 15 rupees a month. So I said I had to pay homage to that school which has produced such good students on 15 rupees a month. It's a 40-foot wall. And Zwinke did the German boy, I did the Little Indian Girl, Map of the World, and 52 puzzle parts, trying to balance nature and industry, not to say get rid of one at the cost of the other, but trying to blend them. Next, please.
Arpana ji,
Yeah.
we are going to continue with the paintings, but it looks like we have a question from the audience. So we'll go ahead and just break it up a little and I'll just address the question to you. Somebody was asking that the placement of figures in your works are often in a straight line or a triangle. Can you talk about the decisions you make about composition?
You know, the day and night is in a straight line, the repeated figures, because it's an endless, timeless cycle of day and night. But the previous mural that you saw, it's a map of the world, and the two figures are the little girl and the little Indian German boy and all. They are placed against that. Similarly, in this work that you're seeing, which is done in the city of Hamburg in collaboration with Zwinke again, they are placed, it's a 50 by 50 foot wall, and the work was done directly on the wall. It's on the notion of time, that the West measures time linearly. We have a circular measure of time which is endless. So I did the Saraswati on a lotus, and we sort of decided to place the figures at random so that the subject, there's a charkha at the bottom, would be the circular against the linear. You know, his linear against my circular motives of charkha, Saraswati, pot with water. And, you know, according to the necessity of the subject, like day and night needed linear. Some need non-linear compositions. So the widows of Vrindavan needed linear because it's been going on for centuries, this exploitation of widows, this discarding of widows. The 1984 massacre series was not linear. So according to the necessity of the subject, I then decide. Yes, this was again, that's me working on the wall with Zwinke. It was amazing how this happened. I didn't do it, it was done for me by some upper force because I never leave my mother for over a week or 10 days, and that's the time I had. So we didn't have time to draw a graph on the wall or to do it on paper first, 50 by 50 feet. I said, we leave it to God. So I went straight from the airport. It was 6 in the morning. I drew the Saraswati on the lotus. There was the scaffolding was there for a month after the mural was complete. I came back to India. It could have been all wrong. The proportion of the wall, the figure, the lotus could have been all wrong. And I would never have forgiven myself. I would have told them to just put the paint, you know. So Zwinke already had done the Indian red because I said I have very little time. So just do a red coat and treat the wall. And it's in a very busy area of Hamburg, just opposite it's a cosmopolitan area. So it's opposite the railway station. So I don't know how the Saraswati came out. We'll go back to the previous slide. You'll see the proportions are just right in spite of the scaffolding and the net. And my legs used to shake when I would go up that scaffolding. And they used to bring my breakfast up. I would work. Those were long days. 6 in the morning till when there was light. So when my back hurt, I would lie down on the scaffolding. We didn't have scaffoldings like that in India. So it was a treat to work on that scaffolding, you know, and feel safe. So this is, you can see it's third, fourth, fifth story, and the mural is still fresh. it's on the concept of Indian versus Western notion of time. So Zwinki drew the scale, the compass, the industrial wheels of Hamburg. I drew my charkha, my that Kundalini Shakti, and it's a shipping area, so he drew a shipping wheel, and we connected it all with the Varli dance of life from the folk art motif that I'd shown you, so that it connects. It's not disparate, it's one unit. And in spite of all the snow and the rain, it's miraculously still very fresh. And I lived right next to it so that I could go at 6 in the morning. Next, please. Next. Yeah, my Buddha series, this is called Compassion, 6 feet painting, and all the bars that you see in the lower part have events that I witnessed, like 1947, Hiroshima, 1984. These are events that I witnessed and we all have compassion for. That's why that Buddha's tear. Next, please. Am I talking too much? Do we have time? This is a
I,
diptych.
Arpanaji, I think we can continue, but if there's any questions that audience or the viewers have, feel free to type those up, and we Arpanaji can address those for you.
I told you it was depicts the discontinuity of color. The Buddha sees suffering, he sees death and old age, and then he becomes a Buddha. So the movement is from the figurative to the abstract in this painting. It's a diptych done in 2 parts, and it's one of my favorite works. And the big bone bothers a lot of people, but that's where the journey began, and he became Buddha. And he left his palace. Like Mahavir, Buddha, they were all born in Nanakji's father was very wealthy. So they were all born in very wealthy families, but they had another search. Next, please. This is in Bihar Museum. It's Buddha and Ashoka, because we all know Ashoka, the king, in 3rd century BC, had conquered so much. He had created so much bloodshed, rivers of blood. And then he said, what am I doing? He came across Buddha's teachings and he converted. And he spread the teachings all over India. He sent his son and daughter, Sangamitra, and I forget the other's name, with the branch of the Bodhi tree, under which Buddha got enlightenment. That's in Bodh Gaya. He sent them to Sri Lanka and Buddhism began to spread. So the sword is a symbol of Ashoka. Next, please. Guru Nanak's painting of squeezing the 2 rotis is very much there in all our homes in calendar art form, because during his travels he is invited by Pai Lalo. No, he doesn't invite. Pai Lalo didn't invite him. Malik Bhago, the rich trader, invited him for a feast, and he was with Mardana and Bala. And he said, I'm not going to his house. So he goes and knocks at the door of this poor carpenter called Pai Lalo. And he says, we are hungry. Do you have anything to eat? He says, oh, I have nothing. I have a little kodredi roti. He says, give it to us. So he eats that and he goes and visits him 7 times. So Malik Bharu is very offended that he's there with all the village and this huge feast and all. And Nanak says, I'll show you why I didn't come to you. So he squeezes Pai Lalo's rough grain roti and his rich ghee-laden roti. Blood comes out of one and milk out of the other. We are all familiar with the story. But as a contemporary artist, I wanted to focus only on the streams of blood and milk. So I had this huge black space, 6-foot painting, and Guru Nanak is squeezing the roti. Next, please.
Arpanaji, we have another question from the audience. So someone is asking that they've noticed a lot of orange in your work. Does every color symbolize something specific in all your paintings? Is there an emotion to each color?
There is, because black, as I said, highlights, if I wanted to highlight the blood and the milk in the previous painting, and his orange robes, because, when he was a householder, and at the end again, he was a householder in Kartarpur Sahib. but all his actions, he could do without food, he could travel on foot, were of a yogi. So that's why I use the saffron color. So also we know Kesri, the
Mhm.
color of sacrifice, and saffron of spiritual enlightenment. Here also the same Kesri color, and because of his travels to all these corners, wherever he could on foot, how many thousands of miles he covered, how many thousands, with just a stick. So this is with the Sikh Foundation, and they had it in Smithsonian for 3 years in Legend of the Sikhs. So on his footprint, and he left his footprint everywhere. Because when I went to Ladakh and Sikkim and where I stayed, it said Lama Nanak was here and so year. When I went to Baghdad, Peer Nanak was here and so year. So he's Baba Nanak, he's Peer Nanak, he's everything to everybody. And that's his journey. Next, please. This is Aarti, which, he says the whole sky is an Aarti. Why do you need a simple thali? Gagan mein thal, Rav Chandi. It's part of our daily prayers. Rav Chandi Pakpane, Tarka Mandal Janak Moti, Dhuk Malyano, Pavan Chavro Kare. Sagal ban rae, Phulant Jyoti, ऐसी आरती होवे भव करना तेरी आरती. This was spoken in Jagannath Puri. So the whole universe is a constant state of singing praises to God, and the sun and moon are the lamps. Next, please. Uh, this is an illustration I did for Kushwant Singh Ji's Hymns of the Sikh Gurus. And ninth Guru Sahib Tegh Bahadur Ji is full of vairag, which is, feeling of separation and the brevity of life. Ram gayo, Ravan gayo, Jako bo parvar. And his hymns are, every Sikh who dies is this, Ram gayo, Ravan gayo, Jaise jalte budbuda, the world is but a bubble, Taise jag ko jaan. So I illustrated that hymn of the Sikh Gurus, and I met with great opposition from Penguin for this painting. They said, we can't show a corpse. I said, it's a reality. Death is a reality. And if Kushwant Uncle has included the ninth Guru's verses on death, we have to. So I had my way, and it's there in the book, Hymns of the Sikh Gurus. Next, please. The watercolor illustration. This is a book illustration for Mala Dayal's book on the life of Guru Nanak, which has come out in 7 Indian languages, and it's gone to like in Oriya, Kannada, Hindi, English, and mainly for free distribution. So I did several illustrations for this book, and I was very honored that I was asked by her to do this book for children, his journey, Guru Nanak's journey. And you'll see the mountain forms are from the miniatures, and so are the trees. Next, please. This is the one and only story I wrote in my life about 30 years back. It's a story on because I don't wear a watch, and that's why I don't know how to open a computer or mobile functions. It's another time. They live in, I think it's a very wrong, has its setbacks. Like we had this morning the experience of struggling with the presentation. So I wrote this story how from childhood we are geared to conduct our lives on the basis of the clock. And I did about 20 illustrations and called The Man Who Always Wore a Watch. It's a children's story. Next, please. And it's been published. He loses his job because he's late. He loses his girlfriend because he's late. It's very humorous also. Next, please. In the end, he realizes that he's never looked at trees. By then, he's old, and he turns in the last page. He turns into a child because he has started looking at birds and water and trees. Next, please. My Yogi series. We have a big, huge rock cut mural in the south of India, Mahabalipuram, which is near Chennai. It's on the sea. A lot of those temples have gone into the sea, but one or two temple survive, and this yogi is there in one of them. So I've done a whole series of yogis and yoginis. And the yantra you see on the left, it's from the tantric motive, and it's supposed to be time versus timelessness. Next, please. Charkha. I've done a whole series of charkha, surrounded by weapons because that's the reality of our times. Peace against violence, and that drop of blood on the right. Next, please. Environment has been a favorite subject. So this is a mirror that I stuck on the canvas, and how ruthlessly we massacre trees. In fact, in the area where we live, 10 years ago was the Commonwealth Games. Before that, they cut 9,000 trees for a small stadium. So my mother and I and a small number of people, 4 5 people, went to the court, and we were in the court for 8 years because they were going to commercialize that with food courts and restaurants. And we won the case against the government, and 2,500 trees were replanted for the first time in Delhi's history. Because these days, the trees that are being cut in India Gate for the Central Vista project are not being replanted there. They are being replanted in some arid soil 22 kilometers from Delhi, whereas the commitment was to plant them in the India Gate area. So for our area at least, we fought 3 cases for trees. And sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't, because in the name of development, and there's so much land mafia here that, and now, frankly, my mother is now 86, I have heart issues. We don't have the stamina to fight legally, but it hurts us. We write letters and often get no response. So this is our responsibility that we are touching the environment. And Tino, your scissor is here again.
Yes.
Next, please. That's little Subhash Chandra Bose figure in one of the syringes. I'll tell you the context. Next, please. This is an installation I did in Chennai, in a gallery, in a solo called, it was all paintings and paperwork, but they gave me a little room because see, technology was coming in a big way in art, and I'm not a technology person. So I did this solo called Painting is Not Dead. And I had this huge canvas spread, and from the syringes, each syringe tip is a blob of pure color. And in each syringe, I introduced the people I love. I found these little figures of Bhagat Singh, Udham Singh, Bose, Gandhi, and I've never been able to do that installation again. It was in Chennai, and I was very happy. And behind that, I had a blackboard and pastels. So the person who inaugurated the show, Gandhiji's grandson Gopal Gandhi, who lives in Chennai, drew a needle and thread because he said it's from my work. So every visitor who came drew on that blackboard. So the old-fashioned pleasure of drawing, of holding a chalk or a pen, and if it was not for technology, we would not be here today. It has massive advantages, massive. But somehow I wanted to say that painting will never be there. Next, please. I did, when those trees were cut, uh, I did this 6 foot sculpture. It's 150 kilos, and it's welded in 3 parts. And as a painter, the few sculptures I've done are flat because I paint on a flat surface. And the scissors there again, that's the tree of life. Um, Next, please. My etchings, I did in the Gadi Studios from 1980 onwards. For about 20 years, I was doing etchings, The River of Time. and the multiple figures which are very special to our region, because as I said, they are in the miniature paintings in Persian miniatures in Rajasthan, but you'll always find them in animal figures, particularly horse and elephant. So I kind of adapted it to human form. Next, please. I've done about 30 etchings in 20 years. They're on zinc plate. This is Yogi again. Next, please. Uh, this is work done over a year ago, much before Corona. The judges of Supreme Court called 5 artists, and they said we have limited money. But I said, okay, if I have the wall of my choice, and they said, but our themes are environment, women's empowerment, all the themes that we deal with, the protection, so-called themes they deal with, very little success. So I said, okay. So I submitted, we had 10 meetings, and out of the 5 artists, I think 2 or 3 backed out because of the money. But I said, okay, if I have the entrance wall in the lobby, and I have lighting of my choice, and I have a protective little wall, a glass wall in front of it, so nobody goes and touches it, because 10,000 people will pass every day from that lobby. So they agreed to all the conditions. So this is like the mural I did in Kathmandu. It's the Buddha trying to preserve all the beauty of nature within him. While the city, there's a dead sparrow somewhere in this, there's traffic lights, there's industry, there's factories belching smoke, there are traffic signs saying stop. So all this crazy, in the middle of that sits the blue Buddha. So this is an environment work, 26 by 6 foot, and they put the text on a metal plaque very decently next to it. Next, please. And facing that is this woman coming out of a brick wall, the scissor and the map of the world on the left, and she's coming out into a world of flowers and trees. And the trees are all from a miniature painting. So I'm always very happy with work in public spaces and also in museums. And in museums, I get offered very, very little, like a tenth of the price of the work. And I always say yes. Like the latest Bihar Museum, I got a letter from the person who had it made, who was chief secretary, and he's the nodal officer even now. He's the Karta Dharta of Bihar Museum, which is a gem of a museum in Patna. I've been to Patna due to Guru Nanak's being there, Guru Gobind Singh Ji's birthplace. Ninth Guru Sahib goes there. There's so many Buddhist sites to visit there, Nalanda, Rajgir, Bodh Gaya. But gone as a pilgrim. But when I get this letter 6 years ago that there's a new Bihar museum coming up and we need your two work, so I chose day and night. Money was not the consideration. They offered very fairly the same amount to the 25 artists they chose. And the other was Buddha and Ashoka because of Buddhism's connection with Bihar. And that is a gem of a museum. It's the latest edition built by a Japanese architect. Fabulous. And the money then becomes no consideration, when you're thinking of, say, a public place like this, or even the murals were done for nothing because hardly any people come to art galleries. We know that. People go to theatre, they go see films, but art galleries are still, another space. So you have to take art into the public. So, next, please. Yeah, during Corona, I did a lot of works because one was totally cut off from everything. There were no exhibitions to see, one was not stepping out. So this is called prayer. And I painted that peacock feather, it's a 6 foot work. Because prayer for Sarbatta Bhala, one was praying for the whole of humanity. This was created during that time. I did huge amount of work, but here I've chosen two. And next, please. The Last Supper. It's based on Leonardo's famous painting, The Last Supper, where what have we laid on our table? Dead sparrow. In my childhood, my grandfather used to feed sparrows twice a day, and 500 sparrows would come to our veranda. After his death, those sparrows came at the same time every day, and we would feed them. And there's not a single sparrow one sees in Delhi. This month was World Sparrow Day, you know, the national day, so called, of World Sparrow Day about 10 days ago. And there were huge ads in the paper, World Sparrow Day, but we've killed them all. We're slowly killing our trees. As I said, the latest casualty is India Day. Thousands of trees are being cut there. It's the most green public area in Delhi. So the peacock, the deer, everything, and more construction coming up, the bones that are the legs of the table. This has led to the pandemic really, because a lot of our staff comes from villages in Uttarakhand near the Himalayas, you know, or the forests of Jharkhand. There's not a single case there. Not a single case in this last 1 year. The big cities have plenty of cases. So this is due to that, the Last Supper. I hope we are not the Last Supper of this world. You know, Tara Gandhiji's granddaughter, last week my mother had her 58th, the first time she had it online, web conference of South Asian writers, 150 writers, 4-day conference. And she said something very beautiful. She said, we don't know how the plants or animals or birds communicate with each other. We don't know their language. But they would be perfectly happy to carry on without us. Without us humans, nature would still continue. In a very happy fashion, they would not miss us at all. Thank you. That's all I had to say.
Thank you for sharing your paintings with us. That was fascinating. Hearing you talk about your upbringing through your paintings, one can see how those experiences in your life are reflected and manifested in your work. Your images are a visual biography, a timeline of the different stages in your life. This has been a real treat for myself, and I'm sure for our viewers. I know there's so much more that we could cover, but we're going to need to wrap it up for tonight. Arpana ji, we have only touched on your magnificent creative journey, and it's hard to do justice to your years of work in such a short time. But we have been very lucky to have you, and it has been a pleasure being in conversation with you. I want to thank you again on behalf of DC South Asian Arts Council. We wish you all the best and look forward to seeing all your new creations. I hope that our paths cross in the near future and I'm able to once again visit you at your studio in Delhi for creative inspiration. Guru Angsang, Sat Sri Akal, and Tinu, I know you would like to have some closing.
Thank you so much, Arpana. Arpana ji, it's been wonderful to hear your thoughts on your powerful work. And it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, for thinking of me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will love to have you back.
Thank you.